Hi, my name is Peggy Beam. I'm the CEO of the Epilepsy Association of Western and Central Pennsylvania, and I'm really excited to be here and really excited that our organization is part of the epilepsy organization that represents the entire country, the Epilepsy Alliance of America. And also we have with us today the CEO from the Epilepsy Alliance Ohio, Kathy Schrag, is here. And the CEO from the Epilepsy Alliance Florida is here, Karen Egozi. And Andrea Zonneveld is with me today. She works with me in Western and Central Pennsylvania. So this is the Western and Central Pennsylvania contingency. Can you tell? We brought our own cheering section. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Epilepsy Alliance America, and we're going to talk about advocacy and things that you can do to advocate for yourself and things that you can do to advocate for those around you who may be living with epilepsy, and hopefully things that you will do to work with the Epilepsy Alliance America. So the Epilepsy Alliance America is a group of organizations who are dedicated to providing real help and real services in local communities to families who are coping with epilepsy on a daily basis. We do programs and services in local neighborhoods, things that help people with daily lives. Every organization does things a little bit different, but every organization is definitely working in local communities, trying to help folks on a daily basis cope with seizures. So right now we have 8 organizations, and we hope to have a lot more join us. I think we had a couple organizations today who said that they were going to be joining us. These are the organizations that are on board now, and we have a table. If you've not stopped by, you can get a lot of information. Make a button. Come and see us. If you didn't go there today, you can come see us tomorrow. I don't know how long the expo is open. Tomorrow? Today. When is it closed today? Oh, okay. Okay. So this is a sample of some of the kinds of programs and services when I talk about the kinds of things that we do to help people day in and day out. Most of the organizations that are members provide things like camp programs, community education, networking, and social events, but also do very specific things that help people get through what a lot of people might consider crisis situations, emergency medication programs, seizure training programs in the schools, lots of seizure training programs in the schools. All of the organizations that are members of the Alliance have been doing seizure training in the schools for decades. Lots of seizure management training for folks. Lots of things like special education advocacy, if your kids are having problems in schools and things like that. Lots of conferences, workshops, support groups. Some of the organizations provide residential services. So it varies from organization to organization, but very kind of hands-on in the local community. Things that I've always sort of considered, what can we do for you today? What can we do for you right now to help you cope with the negative consequences of having seizures or caring for someone who's having seizures? Our organization, for example, has a program to help people get movement monitors. If you have a family member that might be at risk of having seizures during sleep, things like that. So we have some really good brochures out front on our table about all the different things that programs and services can do. So what I think Andrea does a better job of the self-advocacy stuff. We do a program in Pennsylvania that we call the Share Your Story program, where we talk about how you can use your individual story or your family story to self-advocate. And I'm not really sure why, but we all do this. I do this. Everybody in my family does this. For some reason, we are really good at advocating for ourselves in lots of environments. I've watched Andrea and my husband all day today advocate like mad people because UPS didn't deliver some of the boxes that we were supposed to get and didn't deliver them on time. And they were like crazy people on the phone, on the email, off the email. And people do that all the time. And like, I know people that would like not ever buy anything online if they didn't get a free shipping coupon first. And like, people are really good at advocating for themselves in most environments. And then for some reason, when they get into their child's school, or when they have to transition from pediatric care to adult care, or when they have to get into the healthcare environment, everybody kind of gets hesitant about doing that. And again, I'm no exception to that. Everybody just kind of goes like, okay, if that's what the doctor says I should do. So what we really want to encourage people to do is not do that, and to really learn how to tell your story in work environments, in school environments, in healthcare environments, so that you can get what you need and get what your family member needs so that you can get to the point where you have no seizures, no side effects, and learn to cope with epilepsy and continue on with whatever your life dreams are. So I'm going to turn this over to Andrea, and she will walk you through our kind of share your story program.
Switch places.
Sure.
All right, so when we got our topic and we were asked to talk about Epilepsy 101, Advocates in Action, it occurred to me that some people coming in here might think, Epilepsy 101, I know the basics about epilepsy or I wouldn't even be here. But so most people think Epilepsy 101, let's talk about definitions. Epilepsy is a neurological disorder that's characterized by recurring seizures. Sometimes people call a seizure disorder. A seizure is a temporary disruption that causes you to have any sort of symptoms depending on the seizure type. And it specifically happens when your brain's sending all this excess energy. So that's Epilepsy 101, but as I said, you probably already know that if you're here. If you don't know that, there are some things that we can do to help you. Chances are you're here because you have epilepsy or you know someone who has epilepsy. Epilepsy affects a lot of people. Over 3 million Americans are living with epilepsy right now. 1 in every 26 Americans will develop epilepsy in their lifetime. That was a statistic that came out a couple years ago from an Institute of Medicine report. And 10% of the population will experience a seizure at some point, whether it's related to epilepsy or not. If you feel like you need a little bit of help with the basics of Epilepsy 101, I encourage you to reach out to the Epilepsy Alliance America to be connected with local programs and resources. We all have resources that can help. In this photo, I have an example of a binder that we have that's very extensive, many pages, that we can provide you with. We actually have copies of this binder also on a USB, so if you want a digital copy, please stop by our table and we are happy to share that with you. Okay, so advocacy. As Peggy was talking about, advocacy is something that everybody does pretty much every day of their life, but when we're talking about advocacy for epilepsy, things just feel like they're a lot harder. So advocacy on a very basic level, it's an activity by an individual or a group that aims to change something or influence decisions. So the ultimate goal is to change at least one small part of one person's world. Now sometimes we have really, really grand plans, and our goal is to change the whole world for everyone in it. And that's something like try to make everyone aware of the fact that epilepsy is something that affects people, that purple should be the color for epilepsy. Those are really, really big advocacy projects, but there's always small advocacy projects as well. So I love using this picture up here because this is a photo from one of our programs based in Western and Central Pennsylvania. We have a program called the Oscar Project, where we work with families to provide a service dog and then get the dog trained and assimilated into their life. And this is a photo from one of our recipients who when they initially got their service dog, had run into some barriers, let's say, when it came to taking his service dog to school. And it's not that the school was saying you can't have your service dog. They were just making it a little bit more difficult and saying, well, we need a few more days to figure out all the logistics. And they were kind of dragging their feet. And then along comes this gentleman, who is the one who created the endowment that allows us to have our program, who is also an alumni of this school that this child was going to. So in walks this gentleman. He says, I can't wait to see how things are going with this young man and his service dog. And all of a sudden, all of the barriers went away because of one person. So one person can really make a difference. We just have to know how to go about doing that. So we talked about some examples of everyday advocacy, things that you do that you might not even realize you're advocating for yourself. Has anyone ever tried to return something to a store and you forgot the receipt, but you try to return it anyway? Yeah, me too. Now, some stores, they have the policy where they can use your credit card and look up the purchase, but sometimes you have to get really creative and insistent and this is your store's brand, so I couldn't have gotten this anywhere else. And we think about doing things like that and we think of it's a hassle, but it's something that we're willing to do because we've done it before. But when we talk about a health condition, why is it so challenging? Well, the fact of the matter is it doesn't have to be challenging. We just have to think about it differently. Okay, so I would like to boil advocacy down into 4, what I'm calling overly simplified, because this makes it sound a lot more simple than it is, steps. So step 1, we have to identify what needs to change. What kind of change are we trying to cause to happen? Know your rights and what you deserve. So depending on what you're advocating for, it could be that there are already laws out there that can help you get what you're looking for. We just have to know that they exist. The third one, I would say, is the most important. Ask for it nicely. Sometimes the reason why people don't give you what you want is because they don't understand that giving you some simple thing, like a child who has epilepsy who needs a little bit more time processing, needs a little bit more test time, then all of a sudden they could be doing a lot better in school. It's a really simple thing that could make a huge difference in that student's life. And then the last thing is, don't be afraid to fight for what you believe in. So you always want to ask for it nicely, but if they don't give it to you when you ask for it nicely, if it's something that you feel really strongly about, you have to be prepared to fight for it. Okay, so here are some examples of times in your life that you may need to advocate on behalf of yourself or a loved one who has epilepsy. My child is falling behind in class because medications are affecting her processing speed. I'm a teen with epilepsy and my current doctor only sees children. There are a lot of teens who become surprised that when they become a teenager they have to switch doctors. I do not like how my doctor talks to me when I have doctor's appointments. My supervisor is reprimanding me for leaving my desk regularly to take medications. Or, this is another one of those big ones, I feel like everyone treats me differently once they know I have seizures. So these are really good ways to define what it is we're trying to advocate for. Know your rights. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of rules and laws and things out there to protect people who have epilepsy. In schools, you're protected by laws like the Individuals with Disabilities Act, Education Act, and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. These are laws that give you the ability to have an individualized education plan or a 504 plan to make sure that you have access to your education and the ability to really benefit from the education that's in place. When you turn 18, your parents no longer have control over your medical decisions. So you have to be prepared to do things like go into your doctor's appointment by yourself and talk to your doctor. When you apply for a job, you don't actually have to disclose that you have a disability. Even if you're going to ask for accommodations, you don't have to disclose it during the interview process. If you have a service dog, establishments can only ask you the following 2 questions. Is this animal required because of a disability? And what work or task has this animal been trained to do? They can't ask you to show any papers or anything like that that proves that the animal is a service dog. But I will let you know it's pretty clear when you meet someone who has a service animal if it is a legitimate service animal because they go through a lot of training to get certified for that. Okay, the part that we're going to spend the most time on talking today is ask for it nicely. So as I mentioned before, sometimes the reason why you hit barriers is because the person you're trying to work with doesn't understand epilepsy. Maybe they don't know anyone who's ever had a seizure before. So it's really important for you to learn how to share your story in a way that other people can understand. So Andrew Stanton is a person who is a voice actor who's based at Pixar. So I felt it was really appropriate to call upon a talk that he did that talked about the clues to a great story, because I think we can use a lot of these clues when we're crafting our story about epilepsy and how it's affected our family. So here are the clues that he recommended. The first one is make me care. So your story needs to draw the sympathy of the audience. If you want someone to pay attention to your story, you have to give them a reason to care about it. So that's absolutely the first step. The next thing is take me with you. So when you're telling someone a story about epilepsy, if they have no relationship with someone who has epilepsy, they don't really understand how much of an impact it could have on your family, one way to make them understand is to talk about what life was like before the epilepsy diagnosis and how drastically your life has changed as a result. Because that gives them something that they can relate to, and then they can start imagining how their life might be different if they or their loved one had epilepsy. Be intentional. Don't be afraid to share what your motivation is. So if you're telling someone your epilepsy story because you want something to happen, something to change, don't be afraid to come right out and say that, look, what I'm looking for is support for local epilepsy programs and services, or an IEP plan for my child so that they're not falling behind in class anymore. Let me like you. So sometimes when things get really frustrated in life and we feel like we need to advocate for someone, it's really easy to get frazzled and to just be agitated with things. And one of the ways that you can influence a person to do something for you is for them to like you. So if you can keep that in mind, make sure that you're still your normal, likable self. That can help your story have more impact. And then the last thing is delight me, charm and fascinate the audience. So most of the time when you're advocating for something, you need a change and there's a reason why you're looking for that change. So you may not have gotten to your happily ever after yet, but you can explain to whoever it is that you're talking to, look, if you can help make this thing happen, if you can help make sure that I never have to change my work hours, I have a fixed schedule because if I don't and my work hours are changing, I'm more likely to have seizures. You know, this is how my life would improve. This is how your life would improve. That will definitely give people the motivation to want to change things because they want you to get to that happily ever after. Okay, so we brought a worksheet with us. I'm not going to make everybody do homework. But if you want to take some with you or if you want to work on one if you're feeling inspired, we brought a couple of little worksheets to help you structure your story. Not everybody is comfortable with public speaking. It's okay if you don't feel confident when you're talking in front of someone. That's why sometimes it's helpful to take notes and to think about things like what exactly do I want to say? Jot down some notes so that when you talk to people you can get your point across. So here's one way that you can structure your story. You always start with once upon a time, right? So you're going to start the story by setting the scene. So who are you? Because if the person doesn't know you, that's an important first step to introduce yourself. How were things different before epilepsy became part of your life? So this is to help give a person that background so that they can relate to the part of the story of how things used to be. So keep in mind, most people you share your story with have no experience with epilepsy and seizures. And it's hard for them to fathom what it could mean to suddenly have no awareness of what's going on around you, or suddenly hear your loved one having a seizure and having that moment of panic or fear because what if something happens? The next part in the story is always something interesting happens. So this is our detour. But then, so share the moment everything changed. What did it mean for an epilepsy diagnosis for your life? How did your life change as a result of that? Even if you don't have seizures, having someone you love be diagnosed with epilepsy can absolutely change your life. Luckily, so next, share what is causing or could cause a change. So we go from here's where I started here's how my life has been challenged by epilepsy, and here's what's happening or what could happen that could cause a change for the better. So think about things like who has helped you along the way and how. How have those things made things easier for you? And then lastly, we get to hopefully our happily ever after. So tell the listener what they can do to ensure a happy ending. I think one trap that people fall into when they're telling their epilepsy story is they're so focused on telling their story and where they are now that they forget that when you're trying to influence someone, you have to give them something that they can do. So you can make someone feel really compelled by your story and feel really impacted by your story, but if you don't tell them what they can do with those feelings that they're feeling, then nothing's going to change. So no matter how inspiring your story is, you always want to give the audience something that you want them to do next. Okay. So does anybody want to practice sharing their story? I know we have a small group here today, so I won't start calling on people, but quiet. All right, so I will move on. But if you want to think about it and you want to be fearless and do you want to come up on stage? Yes. Yay! There's one on this side too.
Oh, are there?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
That's okay.
Oh, I can go with that.
All right. I'm like standing right by the light.
My name is Mara, and I was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was about to turn 2, actually. So I've had it pretty much for as long as I can remember. But around 2013, 14, I started getting really bad seizures. That's when my seizures really started. I started having like 20, 30, 40, pretty much every day. So luckily though, around 2015 they ended up stopping, and now I've been seizure free for around 2 years.
Yeah. I'm ready for one.
And I actually started fundraising by selling cakes, for epilepsy awareness. I started this project. I started selling cakes and other home baked treats.
Awesome. That is fantastic. So it's not always easy to get up on stage and talk in front of people. And that's why I think it helps to practice. So if you want to take one of those, worksheets and look it over, you can do that and share your story at another time. Don't be afraid to fight for what you believe in. So if just sharing your story isn't changing things, sometimes it takes a lot more effort to cause change to happen. There are advocates in your community that can help. So calling the Epilepsy Alliance America, I am always willing to talk to anyone who's trying to advocate, to give them pointers and to be the backup for that. And I know that everybody else who works for these organizations are as well. We can connect you with local advocates if there's something specific that you're looking for, if it's a legal issue, if it's a school issue. The reason why we didn't go into depth into any specific advocacy issue is because everyone has a very personal story with epilepsy and goes through different kinds of problems and issues and barriers. So we didn't want to go into a lot of detail for any specific kind of epilepsy barrier or anything like that because we want to have some time for questions at the end. But we did want to share this slide, which has some additional national resources. So depending on what you're looking for help with, if it's employment problems or Social Security Administration, the Supplemental Security Income, the Department of Education, so you can learn about your civil rights in education. There are some other organizations out there that do advocacy, who have like networks that will have people who live local to your community who can help you with the problems that you're running into as well. So the next slide is questions, so I'm going to leave that slide up so that if you're looking at it and you want to write something down, you can do that. Does anyone have any particular advocacy issues that they want to talk about or that they have questions about? Because I have some experts in the room over on this side of the room. Yeah.
Well, just to get it started, one of the problems that we had last year with the school was the teachers thought it was a great idea to flick the lights in the classroom whenever they wanted to get the kids to calm down and be quiet. And when you have a kid that's photosensitive, that's kind of tough. So it was like ingrained in the school's like psyche that they needed to flick the lights, so it was all over the place.
Yeah.
So we got them to stop in his classroom, and then they'll go to the cafeteria or the gym. So
Are they still doing that?
no.
Okay, good.
And the reason was because we had the Epilepsy Foundation helping with the talk. So
Yeah. So sometimes it's not some like grandiose, huge thing that you need to deal with. It's the fact that it's a habit that we have to get people to break. So flicking of lights if you're photosensitive, or letting people know that a fire drill is going to happen, because most fire drills involve flashing lights as well. Because for someone who is deaf, who can't hear the alarm going off, they need a signal. But if you're doing a fire drill, there's no reason why you can't let students with epilepsy know that that's going to go on so they can exit the building before the flashing lights happen. So that's a really good example of something that is an easy thing to address if you find out that you need to address it, because there are things that you don't even think about until they happen, and then you're like, oh, we need to do something about this. Does anybody else have anything they want to talk about in particular? No?
I just want to cite examples that maybe don't affect people per se themselves.
Okay.
But, for example, there's been movies that have been made recently
Mm-hmm.
where there is flashing lights or there's things that are triggers. And, the community tells us, the organization,
Mm-hmm.
and we're able to go back to whether it's, a particular station or a director or whatever, to try to let them understand how that affects other people. So that's an instance where it's kind of a grander, but we're all here
Yeah.
to help advocate those kind of issues. And they do come up, and I just use the movie as an example, but there are others.
That's a really good point. As organizations, we are here to help the epilepsy community, and sometimes the things that we can do are by helping you get your message out for things like that. If you go see, for example, a movie and you think that there are scenes in there that are causing, that would cause someone who's photosensitive to possibly have a seizure, let us know, because we have platforms that we can get that information out to let folks know that that's going on, or that they might want to be aware at certain parts of the movie to make sure that they cover the eyes of the person who might be photosensitive, so that they're aware of that. Because that absolutely, sometimes when movies come out, they're really good about that and they'll have a sign hanging up. Sometimes not so much. We had a recent incident where there was a musical that was being performed, and there was a part of the musical that involved flashing lights. It was actually The Lion King. And there was a part of the musical that had flashing lights, and they had a warning that was outside the doors, but it was on a screen that was scrolling. So if you didn't happen to be there looking at the screen when that part came on, then you didn't get the message and you didn't get the warning. So Yeah.
Yeah, and the Epilepsy Alliance America has really good social media, so make sure you like sign up for Facebook, you go to the website, and Instagram, and Twitter, and all that stuff. So when things like that happen, the Epilepsy Alliance America will be like on it. They'll have those notices posted and things like that. And it does happen all the time. I was in Delaware just a couple of weeks ago, and wanted to like jump out of my car and chase the Delaware State Police because of the flashing lights on the bottom of their state troopers' cars.
Didn't work.
My husband thought better of it. Maybe today's not the day to get arrested.
Maybe we're learning tomorrow.
I said, okay, but we have to do something about this.
Yeah, you have to try to be reasonable when you're advocating.
I was like, what is it?
There's times that it's difficult, especially if when you're going into community school, if you feel like you're being met with resistance. There's a lot of times I know that families in our area have experiences. Teachers will think that a parent is trying to coddle the child. And so we provide those advocacy services where we go and we attend the IEP or the 504 meeting, and we're there to kind of present, that child's epilepsy on more what teacher would consider the objective point of view, where they're able to describe this is type of seizures, this is the post-nasal state, these are the medications this child's on, and the side effects of that, and then be able to develop a plan. So utilizing different epilepsy alliance organizations to help you with that advocacy, we're going to take that part of your
Boots on the ground.
All right.
And if well, it's not up there anymore, but and if you happen to, I know one of the big things is there's a big push right now about seizure education in the schools, and all of our organizations do that and have been doing that for decades, as I said. But every state has a parent information training center, and if you need information about special education or your child's rights in the schools, you can find out what that center is and get that information. And it's very interesting to me that there's very little conversation about the fact that under any child's IEP, there's a specific section that addresses supports and training for school personnel. So if a child who has epilepsy is in an environment where the personnel need seizure training, you can just write it into the child's IEP and the school has to find that training for the child. So people should know that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure people are tired
Yeah.
probably want to end their day. Come back and visit us again tomorrow at the table and get some more information.
We have a button maker.
We have a button maker.
And we have a button. We have 2 button makers to use the button maker.
Button maker assistant, right?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
My daughter has epilepsy, and when she was younger, it was easy to advocate, to make presentations at school, to talk about it, because kids are cute, they were listening, and maybe kids didn't understand that much at that point, but teenagers are another species. And it gets really difficult for teenagers to advocate by themselves because they get easily targeted or bullied at school because the other teenagers are not always kind. So any ideas how to continue to advocate and to educate other people about epilepsy? Because there's a lot of myths, like I'm sure everybody knows here, there's a lot of myths that they're not true. And people need to be educated. Any ideas how a teenager can protect themselves a little at the same time advocate?
So I can talk to you about what we do in our areas, and you're more than welcome to visit our website and get some information. I think getting involved with the teen groups that are around is a really smart thing to do. I think being involved in that transition process from especially with the healthcare transition part, adult neurologists are a completely different animal from the pediatric system. And so you're right. I mean, there's like when patients are young and they're in the pediatric system, there's a lot of nurses around, there's a lot of social workers around, there's typically a lot of conversations with dad, and then all of a sudden they're in, at one point it was an adult neurologist, and at least in our area, the adult neurologists are like, who are all these people? And why are all these people in this room? And why is this person talking? You should be talking, and get those earphones out of your ears. And like, why don't you know what medication you're taking? And they're like screaming at the kids, and the kids are like, so it's really important for young people to start very young taking ownership of all of that information. And I think if they do that, they become more confident in knowing who they are and what that means to have a chronic health condition and what they have to do to manage it. And I think that actually helps. It seems to have helped part of it.
And if you're looking, yeah, and if you're looking for ways to get education in the school, a lot of high schools have health programs. And so although you may not easily get into other areas to do education, most health teachers, if you tell them, hey, I have somebody who's willing to come in and do a presentation for your class, it's a day that they don't have to teach. So it's actually really beneficial, because if you can make that argument, this is a free service and you don't have to teach that day. What area are you guys from? Where do you live? In where? Seattle. Okay, so if you're aware of an organization that does education in the schools, using that as a way to sort of get your foot in the door, because sometimes reinforcing, they may have had these programs when they were young children, but they might not really be thinking about epilepsy. I spent the first several years of working at our organization going into schools and doing presentations, and one of the things that I think really helped with high school students in particular was reminding them that epilepsy doesn't just affect you when you're having seizures, because it'll make people think when you say, how many people in here think that you shouldn't make fun of someone who's having a seizure? That seems pretty obvious, but when you point out that medications for epilepsy can have side effects that can affect things like they can make you gain weight suddenly, or they can make you fall asleep in class because they make you feel more tired. Those are the kinds of things that kids might tease each other about without even realizing that it's related to a medical condition. And generally speaking, kids are much less likely to tease someone about something that's very obviously related to a medical condition. So I think pointing out things like that has also been helpful, because it really gets kids thinking about being compassionate. Another thing that you can do is try to talk to folks in the school about having a purple day. Having a day where you challenge everybody in the school to wear purple for epilepsy awareness. Sometimes if you have morning announcements, they'll do announcements in the morning, and you can say, okay, for Purple Day, we're going to spend a minute or two of the morning announcements talking about epilepsy awareness, or telling people 1 in 26 will develop epilepsy in their lifetime. If our whole school represented the whole world, here's how many people in our school would have epilepsy. Those kinds of things that I think are really like eye-opening with high school kids in particular. I think you have to grab their attention with something, whether it's all of a sudden everyone's wearing purple, or it's some fact that they never thought about, and that's a really good way to get the conversation going. Yeah. Or you can just bake a bunch of cakes for your friends, and then, yeah. I mean, you can. Do you do cupcakes too? Because that's probably easier to distribute. Cookies. Oh, well, there you go. That's awesome. That's amazing. Nice.
She doesn't like it because purple is also used for the
Yeah, purple is used for many other organizations. I think the only color that seems to only be used for one thing is pink for breast cancer awareness, because nobody else wants to Yeah, because pink is everywhere and everybody knows what it means. So there's a very limited number of other colors to pick from. So unless we were going to go with like plaid or something like that, then, there's always going to be something else that it means. But you don't actually have to use purple. There's no rule that says that you would have to use purple when you make cookies.
So, in Florida, we have a couple of things. So we have a school, that's just an example, of where they started a book club. They started a club of people supporting epilepsy. And that's another way of awareness. It's actually a sibling of someone with epilepsy, and she started this club, and it's just gone viral, and they do all kinds of things, and they come to our events. And so that's a way for people to get comfortable, and for the teams, and they like to work together. So that's just an idea of something that they're doing that seems to have worked well. And, the club concept, I think, is just an idea that maybe she might not want to start, or she might. Because remember that there are other people in the school with epilepsy also, even though you don't think so.
There probably are.
Else in your whole school?
I doubt it. This school's only like 50 people there.
50 people may? Oh, okay. And that includes some. Okay. Well, that's possible.
Yeah.
You might be
But what's really interesting is when you start talking about epilepsy, there will be people that you know from other parts of your life who they may not have seizures themselves, but they probably know someone who does. And that's something that I think is also really powerful because, it's not something that you have to feel like you're going through alone, because there are other people who are just as afraid to talk about it in front of other people as you might be, because they don't want to be treated differently. So if you have the courage to share your epilepsy story, it's going to give other people the courage to share theirs too.
The other thing I was just going to mention, and then I won't talk anymore, because I didn't want to talk at all, right? But one of the things, like, I don't know in Seattle what it's like, but in Florida, high schoolers do have to do some hours of volunteer work. I don't know if you have that requirement there, but one of the things is getting them to volunteer, like, at an epilepsy walk, or something to do with epilepsy, because when they come and they see all these people and they're like, oh, this is real, and this is something that affects people, it's a way to educate them without standing in front of them and giving them a lecture. So.
Yeah. Did you have something you wanted?
My daughter, who has epilepsy, 2 weeks ago, she decided she was going to have a behavior something purple.
Oh, okay.
And so she invited, I think the oldest person was 85. And what was the youngest, about 7?
No, 40 or
No, my brother's son.
Oh, yeah, right, 7.
So set out, pumpkins and purple paint and all kinds of things to decorate them.
Yeah.
And then I talked a little bit about it, and I started with 1 and 26.
Mhm.
I mean, that got their attention.
Mhm.
And what was interesting, I don't know, did all of them know you had it before then? They all knew, okay. But it generated so many questions.
Mhm.
They were genuinely interested.
Yeah.
And one of the gals, she was going to take her pumpkin and put it on her desk at work, and she put on the pumpkin, why is my pumpkin purple? To generate,
Mhm.
and the whole purpose was just to get it out there, and hopefully they would share with other people, which I think they're going to, because I was very surprised. Somebody even asked, what do I do if someone has a
Mhm.
seizure? But no one had any clue how many people were affected.
Yeah, so when we do our Share Your Story conference in Pennsylvania, we have shirts that we wear when we're going to share our story actually at the state capitol. And it's a keystone symbol, because Pennsylvania, and it just says 1 in 26. We usually have our logo on it somewhere, but it's like the sleeve or the back or something, because we want to walk around with a shirt that nobody knows what it means, because it forces people, most people are very curious, to come up and say, what does that mean? What does 1 in 26 mean? And so having something like that where your pumpkin says, why is my pumpkin purple? Or you have a shirt that says 1 in 26, and it doesn't necessarily say 1 in 26 people have epilepsy, because then someone can read the whole message and be like, oh, I don't have to interact with that person. But have it say something that is attention grabbing, that makes people want to come ask you more about your story, is definitely a really powerful way to get your point across.
Well, they actually have a program here in Irvine, and then they're doing it several places across the country, and it's called 1 in 26, The Art of Epilepsy.
Oh, okay.
And so all of the art that's there, it's a fundraiser, and
Mhm.
all of the art has been done by people with epilepsy.
Yeah.
And it caught on because in a short period of time, it went from 1 city to 7 now.
Wow.
Yeah, all over the country.
That's really cool.
1 in 26. The
Yep.
art of epilepsy.
Yep. He did. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to stick around. So if you have anything else that you want to ask us about or you want to come meet us, we'll hang out for a little bit. But thank you guys so much for coming out this afternoon. We know that it's been a really long day. For at least some of us in our little contingency, this is our first time ever coming to this event. So it's been a lot of fun for us. And we'll be around here, and we'll be around at the table, which is right next to the info table. That's how you can come find us. We have our button maker, and we'll have hopefully our button makers for maybe part of tomorrow, but I think they're also going to go do fun things. So you can stop by, and you can create a button from an existing pattern, or you can create your own. Maybe you want to use an idea that we came up with here today, and color your own button, and we'll turn it into something that you can wear through the parks on Wednesday if you're sticking around for the Awareness Day in the park. So thank you guys so much for coming.